What do you do when you have way too much sock yarn, very cold feet and not enough socks, and a CSM? If your answer is knit dozens of pairs of socks, then you've come to the right place, because that's exactly my thought as well. If you watched my video a few weeks ago on organizing all of my yarn, then you'll know that I have a huge stash of sock yarn, but just not the patience or the hand strength to knit quite that many socks. So instead, I decided to see how many socks I could knit on my circular sock machine, or what I just called my CSM. Before I get started, if you're semi-new around here and you're wondering what the heck is a CSM, I have never heard of a circular sock machine before, then this is the right place for you, because before we get started on knitting, let me introduce you to my beautiful 3D printed circular sock machine. The circular sock machine was invented later than a flatbed knitting machine, but operates on very similar principles, where you have one needle per stitch that moves up and down to create a knit stitch. However, it is laid out, like the name suggests, in a circle, which makes it very nice for knitting circular items such as socks. There is a yarn feeder that helps with the tensioning of your sock machine that leads the yarn into the center of the machine, where it can then spin and crank around with a hand crank to actually create each row or round of knitting. It is called a CSM or a sock machine. However, you can make more than just socks on this. In the Victorian era, they really went wild with the sock machine manuals, including corsets, sweaters, pants. They had a wide variety of things that you could make with a CSM, and I would very much like to try all of those one day. But today we are just going to be focusing on making plenty of socks with my sock machine. Before I dive fully into making these CSM socks, I think I have to create a gauge for all of the different kinds of yarns that I have. I want to make sure that I'm not just making some socks, but I'll make socks that fit. So the first thing that I'll do is I'm going to take a little bit of yarn from each different yarn ball that I have, and using the same tension, I will see how many stitches and rows per inch I get. And then from that gauge swatching, I can generate a set of patterns, and then let's do some gauge swatches. Now that I have my wonderful gauge ready, I can calculate and come up with a pattern for all the different socks that I make from all the different yarns. However, I just love how this looks. It's almost like a very crazy scarf. Honestly, I would consider wearing it, except I do have more plans for this yarn than just socks. So we'll see where we end up with that after we finish making all the socks. I pulled out all the yarn that I'm planning on using for this to estimate how many we think you can make. So looking at this, I think it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 16, 17, 18. And then from the remnants, maybe 2 more, so 20 pairs. So 20 pairs of socks with all the yarn. The Victorians claim to be able to do an entire pair of socks or stockings in half an hour. From my previous experience, I was able to make 1 sock maybe in half an hour, which means that a pair of socks will take me about an hour, and that's without even doing the Kitchener stitch to put the toes together. So I'm guessing that this is going to be at least 20 hours spent in front of my CSM to get all of these socks done in all these colorways. I'm wondering, can I create one very long tube of socks? Can you imagine? Because this is basically what I would do for my sock pairs, except you know, I would have the entirety of the sock done, and then I'd do a little bit of waste yarn in the next sock. So what if I see how long of a tube of socks I could create? 20 hours of sock making. Here we go. Well, it's the first day that I've spent working on my socks on the CSM, and I've managed to get 4 socks done. So 2 full pairs of socks, and it's getting really long. It's already trailing on the ground, so I've tried to come up with ways to kind of keep it from dragging on the ground because it creates extra tension as it's trying to spin around. And I think I might have to come up with a better plan if I'm going to do this 5 more times. This is already the length that it is, which is absolutely wild, and it's just going to get longer from here. The 2 pairs of socks that I've done is from wool that I got from my summer trip to the UK, which I love. So I did the standard heel on the first ones, and then I did a deep heel on my second pair. I think that I like the deep heel better. And you might wonder, how can I tell? Well, I have put this entire tube on my leg and it does come all the way up to my knee so that I put the whole thing on my leg so that I can try it out on this foot. And oh, my original estimate, the last thing I wanted to say is that my original estimate of 30 minutes per sock is about right. I'm getting back into the groove of it. It's been a while since I've touched my CSM, so it's taken me a bit longer than 30 minutes on some of these, but I'd say around 30 minutes is just about right. So I'll keep on steadily working away, and I'll give you any updates as I keep going. Good morning. I literally just got out of bed, so please excuse me if I look a little disheveled, but I wanted to talk to you right away because I literally had a dream. Maybe not a dream, but a nightmare about the CSM last night and knitting socks on it, where I had the thing happen where one stitch unraveled and it went all the way down 20 pairs of socks, and it made me kind of reconsider what I'm trying to do here. I realized, you know, I would at the end of the day like as many socks as possible to be wearable, and I want to enjoy the process of making the socks. So I've decided, rather than making one long tube that would just make me frustrated with the bulk and the risk of messing up on one pair of socks really high, I'll do each pair of socks together in a tube. And so the 4 socks that I have on here right now are 2 pairs. I'm going to take off and reset up for my next pair. This is about enjoying the process and enjoying making these socks as much as having the socks at the end too. Let's get back to some cranking. It is the end of the second day where I've been able to work on my CSM. I thought it'd be a good time to kind of see how far we've gotten. So day 1, I knit these 4 socks, or 2 pairs. I haven't yet gotten to weaving in the ends or kitchenering or doing anything like that. No finishing, just knit them on the machine. Starting today, I did these bamboo pop sock. However, on the second sock, you might be able to see I forgot to do the turnover cuff. I did go in and rehang 30 more rows, fold them over and attach them. I have no idea if this is going to work. And then I was trying to see if I could maybe get one last pair of socks done. And this wool is so this is Shoppel, or Shoppel wool. It's 50 grams of it, and I was thinking that the ball was kind of small, but I went ahead for it anyway to see how much yarn I would need to make one sock. I really saw, like, before I even started the toe that I wouldn't have enough to finish it, so I just took it off the machine to weigh it. This is 30 grams, so I have 20 grams left. So it's not going to be enough for 2 pairs that fit me nicely. I did try this on my foot. Detail is perfection, so I love it. I'm going to unwind this sock, and what I'm going to do instead, I got these 2 yarns together because I thought that the yellow was a perfect offset. So in order to have enough yarn to make 2 matching pairs of socks, I'm probably going to do the cuff in yellow and heel and toe. I could just do the heel and toe, but I think that would leave me pretty close on yarn requirements. However, it is getting a little bit dark, and after making some mistakes today and having to unwind some of my work, I think all I might do for the rest of the day is just unwind that sock, and I will get back to some more cranking on a new day. As I've been cranking away at my socks, I realized that there may be a few of you who have never seen me work on a pair of socks on a CSM before, so I thought that I would kind of step you through the whole process of making a sock. So I've grabbed a nice hot cup of coffee here so I can get some energy in my day. Just a little aside, speaking of my hot coffee, you might notice that I have a cute little design here called Knitting Keeps Me From Unraveling. I've actually created a series of 4 designs for coffee mugs that I thought were really cute. I love having nice mugs to drink tea, coffee, my water out of, and people in my life liked it so much that they thought that maybe it'd be a good idea for me to offer it to you all if you'd like it as well. I will link the Etsy shop in the description below. It's an Etsy shop called Twill Threads by Engineering Knits. I just wanted it to be very, very clear that I am not producing or manufacturing these mugs or stickers. It is by a printing company, so it's not coming from me. I'm not shipping them. I'm not sending them. It's from a different third party because I unfortunately can't do it myself. I wish that I could. Anyone who's ever bought something from me knows that I like to add a little note or something like that in my Engineering Knits Etsy shop. But I can't do that to Twill Threads, so I just wanted to make it very clear that those 2 are coming from 2 different places, but it's still my design that you're getting. So I have 4 different mugs. We have Knitting Keeps Me From Unraveling and Crocheting Keeps Me From Unraveling. This is my reality, as well as my personal favorite, which is I'm a bit sheepish. The backs of the mugs have Engineering Knits on it so that you know who it's from. And yeah, if you're interested, again, please look at the link in the description below for the Twill Threads Etsy shop where you can get some mugs and some stickers. Now back to my circular sock machine. Let's go make a pair of socks. You've seen me work on quite a few socks by now, but I thought some of you might be curious exactly how one of these socks comes together, right, Nutella? Nutella wants her D-I-N-N-E-R. I can't say the word because she knows it and I'll be in trouble when she learns how to spell. But it's not time yet. You can knit both toe up as well as cuff down. I prefer to do cuff down because that's what I learned first and it's most automatic for me. It begins by casting on, and when you cast on this machine, because I do a hung hem, I cast on with scrap yarn. I use a cast on bonnet. You can make your own. However, I got the kitchen sink package from Dean & Bean, which comes with a few of these cast on bonnets. So I just used the one that came with the item, and then I used scrap yarn to cast on a few rows and then some ravel cord because that cord will be removed after I hang the hem. So I want something nice and slippery, and I just use a nice cotton yarn for that. I then crank 30 rows just plain stockinette. And there's really nothing special about this. I just feed in the yarn and go for 30 rows all the way around. The next step I think is the most fiddly of the entire process, and that is where I take out all of the weights from my knitting up to this point, and one by one I hang each of the stitches at the beginning of the work onto the ones that are currently being worked. And this is what creates that hung hem, or that folded over edge, at the top of the sock here that you can see. So when I turn it inside out, you can see that there's some stockinette knitting here. So this is basically 15 rows here, and then you have the fold over that happens. So the starting stitches are knit together with the stitches on row 30, and that's what creates this really nice edge. And because this is stockinette knit, you want that kind of nice folded over edge, or else you're going to have a rolled hem. Maybe you want rolled hem socks, but I personally don't like rolled hem socks, so that's why I do a hung hem. After working the top edge or cuff of the sock, you want to work the leg, and here you just do as many rows as you want for however tall you want your socks to be. The pattern from Dean & Bean recommends 50 to 100 rows. I tend to use 30 because I don't like socks that are quite that tall. So I do 30 for the edge or the hung hem, and then 30 for the leg, so it's easy to remember too for myself. All right, so now we're done with the leg portion, and we have to work on the heel. The heel is worked on the machine, and if you know anything about short rows in knitting, it's kind of the same concept here. I think it also may be called a wedge heel. I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on that. But basically what happens is you work back and forth on typically half of the number of needles on your cylinder, but I go for a deeper heel, so I go for more like 2/3 of the needles. And each time you work back and forth, you move one needle down, so you're working on fewer and fewer of the stitches. And once you get to, the minimum number of stitches that you want to work for your heel, you then add the needles back into working position. When the needles are all the way up in the cylinder, like fully up, they are no longer worked, and I can move the cylinder in either direction over them. When they are further down, they're in working position, and I can basically add the needles back into work, and I work on those stitches again. So that's how I create the heel portion, or the heel cup. Then you want to move on to doing the length of your foot. And I just do mine according to my foot measurements and the tension of the yarn that I have. I think it's between 45 and 60 rows for the tension and gauge of yarns that I was using. And then it's time for the toe. And the toe is worked in the exact same way as the heel. So the heel and toe are identical, except of course for me, I don't use the deeper markers for my toe. I only use half of the needles that I work on. So I first continue working back and forth, removing needles from work, so moving them all the way up. And then once I've gotten to the smallest point, I then put needles back into work by putting them all the way down. When I take the sock off of the machine, there will be a gap at the top. I actually work quite a few rows of waste yarn because I don't want my work to unravel, but that has to be finished off of the machine, and that is the one bit of hand finishing that does happen, weaving in the ends, and then Kitchenering those stitches together on the toe. There is a really fantastic method that the Dean & Bean website goes over, or their YouTube tutorials go over, that is much faster, for me at least, than doing it on the needles. And I personally think that that's a very seamless finish. So this right here is the Kitchener row. You can kind of see it a little bit on the tension, but when I wear the socks, I don't think that you can tell at all. And it feels completely smooth, so it doesn't bother me. I'm quite sensitive to textures and things, and I don't feel it at all, so it doesn't bother me one bit. That is how you make one complete sock. All right, so let's take stock of where we are right now. These are all of the pair of socks that I have knit so far, from where I first started to now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pairs of socks. I have 2 full balls of yarn, so that's at least 2 more pairs there. Oh wait, I forgot one. 3 balls of yarn, so that's 3 more pairs at least there, as well as all of these leftovers for my other socks. So what I'm going to do with these leftovers is I'm going to combine them with the neutral shades that I have to create more pairs of socks. So the neutrals will be probably the main part of the foot, or the neutrals will be the heels or toes. I'm first going to finish these full balls of yarn, and then I'm going to check back in with you, and I'm going to do some weighing and calculations and see how we're going to use up the rest of the scrap yarns. And then I have a lot of sock finishing to do. Let's just keep on cranking away at these solid balls of yarn, and then I will talk to you again soon. Alright, I have just finished all of my solid balls of yarn, and we are at 12 pairs of socks that you can see right here, but I am also just remembering that I have already sent one pair of socks away as a gift, so that's 13 pairs of socks overall. In order to help me understand exactly how best I can use my yarn, I'm going to go ahead and weave in all the ends and sew up all the toes, and then I can get exact weights for the size of sock that I'm making and the yarn that I have, and then I can do better calculations. Okay, it's late. It's been a long day, so my explanations might not be that great. I'm just gonna go sit with a lovely period drama and weave in some ends and sew up some toes. And here is an interlude of Nutella being super cute. I spent quite some time yesterday finishing off all of the socks I've been working on. So this is all the 12 pairs plus a 13th pair that I can't show because I've already sent that off. I also took the chance to fully calculate the weight and yardage requirements needed for each sock type yarn, sock yarn type. I'm a little tired today, sorry. And how much I have left over to see which ones I could potentially make a second pair out of. I don't have enough really to make a full pair, but maybe if I combine it with a different or contrasting color for the toe, the heel, maybe the cuff, then I'll have enough to stretch it, kind of like I did for my pink and yellow socks this pair, which allowed me to get enough of the pink yarn to be able to make a full pair of socks. I have 6 picked out that I could potentially do, and I want to use up as much of my yarn as possible, but I do have a different idea for the leftovers, so I'm not trying to use up everything this time, but you will see what I'm planning to do with the rest. I'm probably not going to show you even more cranking on my machine because it's just exactly the same. Instead, let's just flash forward to when I have finished using up the leftovers of the yarn as far as I can to make full pairs of socks. I've been plugging away at making my, I'll call them plain socks. They're not that plain because I think the yarns are gorgeous with the different color variations and texture variations. I decided that I wanted to add a little bit of variety at the end. So with the yarn that I had left over, I decided to do a lace pattern and a tuck stitch pattern. The lace patterns can be worked by moving stitches from one needle to the other. That creates yarn overs in your work, and there is a full video tutorial on Dean & Bean's website, and they also have a pattern. The one that I did for the pair for myself was one of the other lace patterns that was suggested, and also did a slightly different edge on the top of the sock, which is a picot trim. So instead of doing just 30 rows and hanging hem, I did 15 rows, and then I moved every other stitch over, which created a yarn over knit two together all across that row, so that when you fold it, you get like a little bit of a picot edge across the top of that sock, which added a little extra detail and really didn't take that long of time at all. I could even do that with non-lace socks and just add that little bit extra bit of interest to my socks. I still very much enjoyed kind of figuring out how to work the full lace pattern across the entire sock, and then once you hit the heel portion, you only want to work the lace on the top of the foot and not the bottom of the foot, or else it's not very comfortable to walk on. So I like that. I think it's a really cute pair of socks. The second one is a tuck stitch pattern. Now, I was trying to think if there is a similar thing that you can do in hand knitting, but I don't know. I've only really ever heard of tuck stitches in relation to my knitting machines. You move a needle out of work for a set number of rows, so you get long carryovers across that needle, and then you put it back into work, and then that new stitch incorporates all of that yarn into one, and it kind of tucks everything together, and you can create really interesting textures with that. So I did a textured diamond pattern, although to me I think of like dragon scale almost when I see it, and I think it's really cool because I have, you know, a plain colored sock, but the texture of the sock is different because of the tuck stitch that was added. It does make the sock slightly tighter. Also managed to make them uneven lengths on the leg area. I tried so hard to make them match, and I didn't notice until both of them were off the machine, and it was kind of too late for me to fix it, and I kind of also ran out of yarn for me to fix it. So that made me a little sad, and I'm glad that I went through and I did some more fancy patterns because it did get a little repetitive after 18 pairs of exactly the same pattern of socks. So it was nice to have that variety. After my last pairs of socks came off of the CSM, I had to do the finishing touches on them, and I couldn't believe it. With the yarn I had, I did manage to create 20 pairs of socks, which I can't wait to show you here right now in the final reveal. After many weeks of work, to be honest, many more weeks of work than I thought it would be, I always tend to underestimate how long something like this will take. I am so happy to have all of these pairs of socks done. Many of them will be going into my own sock drawer, but some of them are destined as gifts, and I really hope that the recipients enjoy them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed watching this. Feel free to subscribe if you like videos like this or anything about historical fiber crafts and fiber arts. Also, the link will be down below to my main Etsy shop where you can check out the knitting patterns that I've translated from historical sources, as well as the Twill Threads Etsy shop where you can check out the mugs and stickers that I've designed. Thanks again, and Nutella and I say bye until next time. Nutella, is it finally time for dinner? Yeah. Oh, it's time for dinner? Okay. Bye.